Hello everyone, my name is John Bussart. I'm an HPE Business Transformation Center engineer for Ingram Micro. I help support HPE servers, blade system storage, as well as Aruba networking technology solutions. Now normally in my videos what I like to do is show you a slide from a popular PowerPoint and then show you what that means within a management context. But every once in a while, we certainly like to do an unboxing video. And that's what we're going to do today. We're going to do an unboxing of an 8325H switch. So the H stands for half width, meaning you can get two of these in a one-use space. Now in a prior video, we did unbox an 8325 switch that was full length. So these are a little bit different. They mainly come up and get used a lot inside a storage environment. So if you need to create full redundancy to your storage area network, something like iSCSI, these switches make a lot of sense to create that level of redundancy in a one-use space. Right? But any of the 8325 switches would work well for a storage area network if you certainly wanted to do that. But again, these switches, these H switches, do replace the Mellanox version of the HP switches that were out there because they are no longer creating those switches. So you can get these switches in two different port configurations. You can get one with 18 SFP28, and you should know based on the SFP that you put in there that could be 10 gig or 25 gig connection. This switch will also have 4 ports of QSFP28, which would be your 40 gig or your 100 gig style connection. All right, so that's one of the switches. The other one is going to have 16 QSFP28. So this switch could have 16 ports of 100 gig connections. So they certainly do support 40 gig or 100 gig connections, but this is for higher throughput type of environments. All right, now there are also on these switches 2 SFP ports that they'll sometimes label telemetry ports, and these could support 10 gig or 1 gig connections on either one of these switches. So again, these switches are made for the storage market. Now you'll see 2 of them that are listed in different places. One's more for the storage side of sales and the other side is more for the networking side of sales. So you'll see one that's listed as SN8325H and you'll see another one listed as CX8325H. Functionally, they're exactly the same. It's just what's sold is generally what you're purchasing it with or purchasing it for. So with all that being said, let's unbox this switch. All right, because the 8325H that we'll be looking at today is a half width 1U rack mount switch, meaning you can get 2 of these switches next to each other in 1U of space with the full redundancy on the switch and everything as far as power supplies and whatnot. I thought it would be a good idea to actually look at the rack mounting hardware that's associated with this. So these are the actual rails, and over here is the actual enclosure that the switches will be going into. So neither one of these are actually the switch itself. I've got that behind me. I'll pull that out as well. So if we open this up, and these are the rails. There were security seals on this guy. If we open that up, you see the 2 rails that are in here. There are some screws, humidity gel that you normally see in these things. If I take them out, you'll see a little bit of documentation on the bottom. So, pull them out. And I'll just grab one of these out of here so we can see it. So they are adjustable, right? And they are clip based, meaning you can press a clip. Let's see, where is that? Right there, and it'll clip into your rack. Right, so these will screw in and then you'll clip it down through this. And the same thing's true on the back. So this will actually be the rack mount housing itself. So if we open that up, got this top piece here. Over here we have a little bit of cable management. This is to make sure the power cords stay in. You kind of clip them in the back. Some screws. And the enclosure itself. So let me get this out. On top here. Now obviously with all these unboxing videos I do, I have opened this stuff up before, but I put everything back in the box just so you can see how it looks like. But if you're familiar with my videos, you know I do that. So if you look here, this is where the switches will go into, is up front here. There's two pieces of cardboard. So let me get those out. And there's our enclosure. So again, there's where the two switches go in. And if we flip this around, well, that's where the rails mount. And if we flip this around, power connectors come out the back through over here. All right. So let me set this aside. And let's grab a switch. This is one of the two switches that we have. So if I open this up, again, we have some rudimentary documentation. Obviously, I'm going to go up to the website to get anything substantial. This is just a piece of cardboard. Keeps everything in place. Got two power cords. These have the little notch in them over here. Right. So let me get this out and I'll place it down and we'll take a better tour of this. I'll realign the camera a little bit. Alright, so here's the front of our 8325H switch. Now before I go over the ports on the front, let's take a look at the back real quick. There's something of interest that I thought I would stop and show you. All right, so if normal NTP isn't enough for you, so network time protocol, there is PTP, which is more accurate. All right, and these are the connectors for that. These are SMB connectors. One is labeled as PPT1, the other one's labeled as 10 megahertz. So this is related to that. If you're interested, it should be interesting to note that there are 8325P switches which would be related to that type of precision time. Down on the bottom here there are some LEDs as well as a USB console connection if you want that. Over here are the two power supplies. Here, so it is certainly redundant, but these power supplies aren't removable, but keep in mind this is a pretty small switch. So in the front, we have 18 SFP28 ports. So these could do 10 or 25 gig, depending on the SFP that you install. Over here are 4 QSFP28. So those will do 40 gig or 100 gig. Or you can get the breakout cables if you want, which will break out those into, like if you get 100 gig QSFP, you can break those out into 4 25 gig connections. Obviously there's some config you need to do inside the switch to get that capability. But over here are what are labeled in some documentation as telemetry ports. They're just straight up SFP ports. They do 1 gig, they do 10 gig, depending on what you put in there. Because they were labeled telemetry, I wanted to look at the config file on the switch to see if maybe this was in some separate VRF or something like that. It was not. One of the things I will make you aware of is that the config file is pretty blank. One of the things I noticed moving from AOS or the ProCurve line of switches to the CX-based switches is the AOS-based switches were more VLAN based, and when you looked at their config files, whereas CX switches, when you look at them, you'll see all their interfaces listed in here. Now, when I logged into this switch, I didn't see any of that. I actually had to configure a port in order for the port to kind of show up in the config file. All right, something just to be aware of. Over here, on the top here, we have a console cable for rollover cable or whatnot. Beneath it, there's a USB connector. Right, and then down below, there's a management port. Right, your out-of-band management. Right, and that would definitely be in a different VRF. That would be the management VRF. Right, and then here would be your asset tag. It's got your serial number and things like that. Now there is a different version of this switch as well. It's got all QSFP ports on it, so 16 of them. Right, so this will be all QSF ports going across. This side will still be the same, including the 2 telemetry ports as well. Right, so let me load this switch up inside the enclosure and show you what they look like side by side. Alright, let's slide in the second switch. Got both of them in there. You can see it kind of clipped in. Alright, if I wanted to pull this out, this is in there pretty tight. I have to actually push down to be able to pull that back out. Right. They're the same switches on both sides, so it isn't like there's different part numbers for the left and right. Right, so again, these are half-width switches. You're going to see 2 versions of these switches. They're really the same switch. They just got different part numbers, meaning that there's an SN 8325H and then there's a CX 8325H. One is more on the Aruba networking side of things, and the SN ones are made for storage networking. All right, so this switch, the call to action was when Mellanox discontinued the SN 2100 and the 2110, which is, again, the half-width switches that kind of left a hole in the configuration for Private Cloud Business Edition, or what some people remember as PCBE, or if you remember the original naming was DHCI, or Disaggregated Hyperconverged Infrastructure. So it's a hyperconverged solution that had physical storage instead of software-defined storage. But anyways, when you configure one of those, these half-width switches made a lot of sense because you got a lot of redundancy in a small series of space, and this can support your entire storage environment, off just a couple of these switches. Right, and I actually like these switches a little bit better. I found the Mellanox switches were certainly fast, but I find they were difficult to work with, and in particular the plugs on the back that happened to fall out, you had actually unlock the switch and pull it all the way out in order to be able to fiddle in the cable. Whereas with this, if we go look at the back of this guy, we will see that its connectors are right there, so I can get them in and out. I can see LED, I can get to the console connection and things like that. So that's kind of nice. Right. So, the 8325H. I hope you enjoyed this video, and please stay tuned for more videos.